Revelation chapter 7, we're talking about the 144,000. My memomatic for this chapter is 2 sevens are 14, and those are the first two numbers in the 144,000. I know I have to stretch it on some of these. I'm just trying to make it doable. So we've been talking about the 144,000. We're down at verse 4, Revelation chapter 7 and verse 4. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. He heard the number. Oftentimes he'll say who's speaking, who tells him something, but here he just says that he heard it. 144,000 is a number that a lot of people don't want to believe is literal. They don't like this number. Several attempts have been made to avoid it. And the primary reason for wanting to avoid it is they don't want this to be Jews. And when you have the listing of 12 tribes, and they're named one at a time, and the number from each tribe, it's kind of hard to get around that. You got to be wanting to bend it to somebody's theological viewpoint to go in that direction. But theology which replaces Israel with the church needs a figurative understanding. Oftentimes in your Bible, if you're watching the headings in the Old Testament, it'll say the church this and the church that. And it's because the people who have written those notes believe that Israel is the church and the church is Israel, which I'm convinced is definitely not the case. But if you have that theological predisposition, you don't want this to be 20,000 rather, Jews from each of the 12 tribes of Israel. So you need to come up with something else. From every tribe of the sons of Israel, they object because they say, we don't know who the tribes are. We've lost track. We couldn't possibly do that today, therefore it can't be. But the fact that we don't know doesn't mean that God doesn't know.
Amen.
And God told us that there would be 12,000 from each tribe. He must have kept track of a lot of people from each of the tribes of Israel. I don't think that's going to be an objection that we can go with. There are 12 tribes mentioned every time there's a list of the tribes of Israel. Since there are 12 here, and there can only be 12, there are never 13 tribes, there are never 11 tribes. There are always 12 tribes of Israel. But the list of names is not always the same. But wherever there's a list and it gives 12 tribes, we have to believe that's all of Israel. There are only 12 tribes. It represents all. But then when there are different tribes, you wonder what happened to this tribe. Why it's not named here? What's God doing with that? Talk about that a little bit more later on. But these must represent every tribe, the whole of Israel. That's all there is, 12. There are 144,000. They're from every tribe, but they are not the total number of Jews on the earth at that time. This is 144,000 selected out of the Jewish population. It is not the total population of Jews. God selects some to seal and leaves the rest of them, by implication, unsealed. Revelation 14:4 says, these are the ones who have not been defiled with women. It's 144,000 there too. For they have kept themselves chaste. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been purchased from among men as firstfruits to God and to the Lamb. It's not reasonable to suppose that every Jew on earth matches that description. which is another support for the idea that these are not all the Jews. This is a selection. Of course, we talked last time about the fact that they're all men, and not all Jews are of that persuasion. Okay, verse 5. From the tribe of Judah, 12,000 were sealed. From the tribe of Reuben, 12,000. From the tribe of Gad, 12,000. From the tribe of Asher, 12,000. From the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000. From the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000. From the tribe of Simeon, 12,000. From the tribe of Levi, 12,000. From the tribe of Issachar, 12,000. From the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000. From the tribe of Joseph, 12,000. From the tribe of Benjamin, 12,000 were sealed. J.B. Smith says there are 29 places where the tribes of Israel are mentioned. 29 different places. I didn't realize it was that large a number. None of them list more than 12 tribes. Where a tribe is left out, it is usually Levi. Levi, of course, was made the priestly tribe, and they were given cities out of the territory of the other tribes. They were not given their own territory. And so where you're listing territories, you wouldn't include the name of Levi, since they did not have a territory. Dan was the first tribe to go into idolatry, and Dan is not mentioned on this list. We can think about that a little bit more. 19 of those 29 arrangements differ each from the other in some way. 19 of the lists of the tribes of Israel differ each from the other in some way. This list does not match any of them, of course. This is a different list. The tribe of Judah is listed first here. The last tribe is the tribe of Benjamin. You expect that because Benjamin was the last born. And following the genealogical order, you'd expect Benjamin last. But following that order, you would expect Reuben to be first because Reuben was the firstborn. Judah is a particular interest because Jesus Christ came from the tribe of Judah. The book of Revelation is largely about Jesus Christ. He's the one in chapter 1. He gives his messages to the churches in chapters 2 and 3. After the throne room scene in chapter 4, he's the Lamb who is worthy to open the seals. In chapter 5, he's all the way through. And so his tribe to be listed first, we might think maybe it's because of the importance of Jesus Christ in this list. Dan's not listed. Dan is listed as receiving a land allotment in the millennium. Now, there's a little bit of theology in this, but in Ezekiel, chapters 40 and following are in a millennial context. It's describing a temple that has not existed in history and which will exist at that time. And it describes it in great detail, measures it out. Clearly, it has to be an end-time temple. But it lists the tribes of Israel at that time. And they all go very orderly from east to west across the territory of Israel, and they're just like a stack of plates, one after another from north to south. And then in the center, there's the area for the temple and the prince and the high priest and some other things there. And then right straight down the stack below that. And in that list of tribes, Dan is included. So in the millennium, there is a tribe of Dan that has a tribe, that has a land territory. But Dan is not mentioned in this list. as one of those tribes from whom 20,000 are sealed. Ezekiel 48:2, beside the border of Dan from the east side to the west side, Asher, one portion. Just pointing out the border of Dan there. Okay, so why might Dan be left off of a list of those that are sealed? That's an interesting question, isn't it? Deuteronomy 29:18 through 21. Doesn't sound like a lot of verses, but it's a fairly large portion because they're pretty long verses. Deuteronomy 29:18. So that there will not be among you a man or woman or family or tribe whose heart turns away today from the Lord our God to go and serve the gods of those nations. That would be the nations that lived in Canaan before they went in. There will not be among you, there shall not be, there must not be among you a tribe or a man or a woman or anything that goes after those gods. That there will not be among you a root bearing poisonous fruit and wormwood. It shall be when he hears the words of this curse that he will boast, saying, I have peace, though I walk in the stubbornness of my heart, in order to destroy the watered land with the dry. He's going to be proud. He's following his idols, and he's going to say, well, I have peace. I'm at peace with this. Verse 20, the Lord shall never be willing to forgive him. Wow. The Lord shall never be willing to forgive him, but rather the anger of the Lord and his jealousy will burn against that man, and every curse which is written in this book will rest on him. And the Lord will blot out his name from under heaven. Then the Lord will single him out for adversity from all the tribes of Israel, according to all the curses of the covenant which are written in this book of the law. After you read that passage, and when you realize that Dan was the first tribe to go into idolatry, you might think the Lord was very gracious to the tribe of Dan that they're listed in the list of tribes in Ezekiel. And you can understand why maybe they were left out from the list of tribes that were sealed. They didn't get the protection in the book of Revelation chapter 7. Dan appears to be singled out for adversity. It's a time of adversity. We've had 6 seals. The 7th is about to be opened. We're going to have 7 trumpet judgments and 7 bowl judgments. And whoever from the tribe of Dan is there, it looks like they're going to go through without the seal, without the protection. Joseph is listed. Joseph in this list is listed as one of the tribes. Now you remember what happened. God took Joseph's 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, instead of Joseph. So Levi wasn't listed, but Ephraim and Manasseh, 2 from Joseph, were listed, and that brought the number back to 12. Here, Joseph is listed, but Ephraim is not listed. Joseph is listed, Manasseh his son is listed, but Ephraim is not listed. And that's kind of a remarkable omission too. It's the same number if you've got Joseph and Manasseh, or if you've got Ephraim and Manasseh. And maybe you say, well, it's the same people and they're sealed, but they just don't talk about Ephraim. His name is left out. And sometimes God just leaves somebody's name out as a matter of you don't get the honor of being named. So that's a possibility here. On the other hand, it may not be that way. I mean, Joseph, as you pass down from there, the 2 sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh, were chosen to be Jacob's. Jacob said, they'll be mine, and then any you have after that will be yours. And Joseph did have other sons, so there were other Jews that were not of the tribe of Ephraim or Manasseh, technically speaking. And so they could have been sealed, could have been some of these other families that hadn't been a tribe all along, and they become the tribe of Joseph at the end time. Possibility there. I'm reading from Judges 17, the first 3 verses, not to read a rather extensive passage, which, although it's interesting, would take us quite a bit of time. Judges 17, verse 1. Now there was a man of the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Micah. He said to his mother, the 1,100 pieces of silver which were taken from you, about which you uttered a curse in my hearing, behold, the silver is with me, I took it. And his mother said, blessed be my son by the Lord. Then he returned the 1,100 pieces of silver to his mother, and his mother said, I will wholly dedicate the silver from my hand to the Lord, for my son to make a graven image and a molten image. Now therefore I will return them to you. So Dan may have been the first tribe to go into idolatry, but Ephraim had a rather prominent example of going into idolatry. So as the story continues, the tribe of Dan robs this family of their idol and takes it with them as they're moving north, because they didn't like their territory in the south, and they went up north and became the northernmost tribe in Israel. So we have one family in Ephraim versus the tribe of Manasseh involved in idolatry. So, all through the Old Testament, there are many passages in which the northern 10 tribes are named Ephraim. Ephraim and Judah. Sometimes it's Israel and Judah. But this tribe is so large and so significant that their name stood for the northern 10 tribes. Very often come to the book of Revelation in this list, and they are off the list. Not there. Manasseh was Joseph's other son. He is named here. Gideon was from the tribe of Manasseh. Some from Manasseh defected to David before he was king of all Israel. Manasseh was part of the 10 tribes in the north, and they weren't following David the first 7 years. But some from Manasseh did follow. When Hezekiah sent invitations to come reestablish the Passover had been neglected for many years. He'd cleansed out the temple, had Hezekiah, and he was inviting folks from up north to come down, and they rejected it. Nevertheless, 2 Chronicles 30:11, nevertheless, some men of Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. So there was an example of Manasseh humbling themselves, as to some of them, and coming for the rededication of the Passover, reobservance of the Passover. And Manasseh gets named on the list, and Ephraim does not. Now, are these the reasons? I can't tell you. I can just tell you what the history was. And maybe these things had something to do with it. God has a very long memory. And it's a good thing to keep close accounts with him. And Levi is listed here. Now, as we said before, Levi was not listed most of the time because they didn't have a tribal territory. But now Levi can have a tribal territory because Levi is no longer the priestly tribe. The high priest is who? Jesus Christ. Levi is not the priestly tribe anymore. Doesn't have to give offerings anymore. So Levi is listed, and Levi has a tribal territory here. And that's the 144,000. I'm moving on to the great multitude. But before I do, maybe somebody has a question about the 144,000. Purpose. Let's see, I think I had that in my notes, and I don't remember saying anything about the purpose. What would be the purpose of the sealing? That's what your question is, the purpose for sealing them? I think we may have discussed that last week. The purpose for sealing them was to protect them against the things that are coming. The winds are stopped at the beginning of the chapter. And the 4 angels are told, don't let the winds loose until I have sealed the 144,000. When the winds are released, then we have the trumpet judgments. And these judgments are coming on the earth. And God has chosen 144,000 that are protected so that they will not suffer the effects of the trumpet judgments. They're being protected from the coming judgments. If the angels turn loose those winds, the trumpet judgments start, and they haven't been sealed, they're not ready yet. So to get ready for the trumpet judgments, we are sealing 144,000. Just men, not married men, don't have wives and children to take care of. Not everybody, but chosen witnesses, 144,000. Later on, we're going to see 2 witnesses. And they will be sealed so that nobody can kill them, at least for the time being. So that's the purpose.
Well, that's kind of where I was going, was not so much what they were sealed, what their job description was.
What they were going to do.
Yeah, that's more like what I was thinking.
Witness.
Yeah.
Glorify God, that's it. Verse 9, Revelation 7:9. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could count, from every nation and all tribes and peoples and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes, and palm branches were in their hands. And they cry out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. It says, after these things, we've commented about this kind of thing back in chapter 4, after the messages to the churches, after these things. It introduces a change of scene. It introduces something distinctly different. This multitude is different also from the 144,000. They are different in that they are in heaven. The multitude is in heaven. The 144,000 are on the earth. That's why they need protection. They're not numbered. It's a great multitude that no man can number. Obviously, the 144,000 can be numbered, and they are numbered. The multitude is from all the nations. Those who are sealed are Jews. The multitude is safe in heaven. Those who are the 144,000 are safe on the earth during the tribulation because they're sealed. And of course, the great multitude is a far larger group than the 144,000. This multitude is like the martyrs that are under the altar. You remember when the 5th seal was opened? The first 4 seals were riders, horses, different colored horses. 5th seal was opened, and we had the souls of the martyrs underneath the altar. We found out that was the golden altar when we were studying that. And these are somewhat like that, but they are not called martyrs. They come out of the tribulation like those at the 5th seal come out. They are wearing white robes like those at the 5th seal are wearing white robes. And they have not been sealed like the 144,000 are sealed. So those that are the martyrs of the 5th seal are in heaven, and they have been killed. these 144,000 are still on the earth and will not be killed, at least up through chapter 14. They're all still there. Not called martyrs. They're from every nation. The national source of those in the fifth seal is not identified. It doesn't tell us whether they're from one nation or many nations or whatever. These have palm fronds, and those did not. At least it wasn't mentioned that they had palm fronds. Palm fronds remind us of the Feast of Tabernacles. We'll come back and visit that to see if that's the right identification later. Some take this to suggest that they are on earth during the millennium. They think this great multitude is on earth during the millennium. The Feast of Tabernacles anticipated people on the earth during the millennium. At the Feast of Tabernacles, they shouted, Hosanna! And that's like the cry of salvation that's made by this great multitude. However, to place them that way ignores some evidence. They are in heaven. They're not on the earth. And this is chapter 7 before the seventh seal. There is a lot still to come here. It's not happening during the millennium, which is a bit later. Some think that these, the great multitude, are in the eternal state after the millennium. That they are on the earth, it's eternity, the millennium is over, and these are people from all of these nations that are in the millennium. This has the same problem as the other one, though, in that these are in heaven. They are not on the earth. And so that doesn't fit either. We're still in a different time frame also in the seventh seal. So who are they? They are a mixed group of martyrs. They died during the time of the first through the sixth seals, maybe mostly towards the end. I don't know. It doesn't tell us, but they died sometime during the first half of the tribulation. They are in heaven while 144,000 are on the earth, being sealed. Salvation to our God. Salvation to our God. I've always been curious of that. What does that mean, salvation to our God? And I hadn't picked up on the fact that salvation has two different meanings, the way that it's used, particularly the way it's used by John in the Scriptures. We're familiar with salvation, which has to do with forgiveness of sins and gaining life, and that's salvation the way we think about it. Salvation is also used as victory, just plain victory without the forgiveness of sins aspect. And I'm not saying that anybody, is getting the victory without having their sins forgiven, but just plain victory. John 12:27, now my soul has become troubled, and what shall I say, Father? Save me from this hour. Same word. Save me. Jesus is praying, save me. He doesn't need salvation in the forgiveness of sin sense. He's looking for what? What he's not going to pray, and so he's not looking for is victory instead of being crucified. And that sense fits in some other verses. I think I won't bother going into that. And it fits other verses in Revelation. Revelation 12:10, then I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren has been thrown down, he who accuses them before our God day and night. It's talking about victory here when it says salvation has come in that passage. It's talking about a victory that God has accomplished over the evil one and the forces of evil in the world. And something like that occurs again in Revelation 19 and verse 1. So, if it says, salvation to our God, And it means victory. Oh, that makes good sense indeed. And that's exactly what they're saying when they say salvation to our God. They're talking about the victory which he is accomplishing. And they're, of course, doing this in giving credit where credit is due after they have arrived in heaven with him. They were standing before the throne. This is the first representation in the book of Revelation of anybody from the earth standing before the throne. We've had the 4 living beings standing before the throne. We've had the Lamb before the throne. We've had the 24 elders before the throne, but we saw the 24 elders were heavenly beings, not earthly beings. So this is the first time we have anybody from the earth represented in the book of Revelation as standing before the throne. They're clothed in white robes. White robes are used to indicate victory. When Christ comes back to the earth with all of his forces, they're all clothed in white. It's a victory approach to the earth. They're coming to the earth in victory. Palms represent victory also. And they were commonly used that way at that time. When Christ had his triumphal entry into Jerusalem, palms were there. It was, "Hail, receive the King, victory!" They were also used to build tabernacles during the Feast of Tabernacles. So white robes indicate victory, and palms here represent victory. And the white robes also represent righteousness, white for righteousness.